ॐ नमो नारायणाय ॐ नमो नारायणाय
Asmad Gurubhyo Namaha, Asmad Parama Gurubhyo Namaha, Asmad Sarva Gurubhyo Namaha. So we're continuing on with Agamas and Sri Vaishnav, Agamas and South Indian Vaishnavism by Dr. V. Varadachari of the Sanskrit Indological Institute in Pondicherry, or the French Indological Institute in Pondicherry. And we've come to the final chapter, the conclusion. So let's look at the conclusion. Chapter 11, conclusion. In the preceding pages, the Vaishnavism of South India has been shown as being based on the Vedas, epics, and other ancient works, and as later developing under the influence of the Puranas and Agamas. Agamas meaning Pancharatra Agamas and Vaikhanasa Agamas. There's, of course, other Agamas too, but we're concerned mostly with the Vaishnava Agamas here. The variety of sources and influences makes it inevitable for that the leading concepts, like those relating to the avatar and the vyuha concepts, evolved at different times in different ways. There does not seem to be any uniformity in treating them. Modern scholars cannot trace these concepts definitely to any sources or chart the stages of their evolution. Earlier in this work, it has been suggested that the Pancharatra is only a revised version of the Ekanti Dharma, which has been dealt with for the first time in the Vaikhanasa system. The Yantra concept, which could have served as a link between those of Japa and Pratima, Pratima meaning a figure of a deity, and Japa meaning the chanting of a mantra. So between the mantra and the deity, we have this idea of a yantra, which is a two-dimensional deity, a representation of the deity, which includes the engraving of a mantra on a geometrical form. Did not find scope in the Vaikhanasa system, but it's there in the Pancharatra system. But it is the pratima, or the image or icon, that occupies a place of importance in both Agamas, both the Vaikhanasa and the Pancharatra. The Vedas do not seem to refer to the worship of images of God. The Vaikhanasa Agama, however, declares that such worship is the best way to approach God. And to use the Vedic mantras, and the use of Vedic mantras is enjoined in both Vaikhanasa Sutras and the Vaikhanasa Agama. In fact, they claim that any sacred rite performed in the holy fire is only worship of God or Vishnu. The Vedic ritual was thus treated as a form of worship of God. Because of this, the Mimamsakas, meaning the Karmakandis, the Purva Mimamsakas, right, those who are interested in Karmakanda, or the ritualistic portion of the Vedas, right, as the Shravana ceremonies, in other words, and other orthodox followers of the Vedas are opposed to idol worship or icon worship or deity worship, did not care to criticize the Vaikhanasas, because the Vaikhanasas also were considered Vedic, because they did claim that the Vedic ritual was a form of worship of God, the sacrifice, in other words, the yaga. So the Pancharatra system, however, have fared differently. It was criticized as foreign in origin and subject to foreign influence for allowing worship by those not entitled to Vedic studies. Because in the Pancharatra system, the initiation and, in fact, even becoming an acharya or performing worship is open to all the different castes, and genders, whereas in the Vedic system, it's only the Trivarnika, Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya males who are allowed to perform worship. So it was criticized for being subject to foreign influence, for allowing foreign meaning outside of the Agamas, outside of the Vedas, but those not entitled to Vedic studies and evolving Tantrika mantras, means non-Vedic mantras, for their use, and using yantra and mudra meaning the hand gestures. Okay, so these things are not so much there in the Vaikhanasa Agama. In the course of this book, these criticisms, and definitely not in Vedic Shrauta ceremonies. In the course of this book, these criticisms have been met. It may be remembered that the criticisms on the Pancharatra Agama invite reference to the Utpatya Sambhavadikarana of the Vedanta Sutras. So there's an Adhikarana, or there's a particular discussion in the Brahma Sutras or Vedanta Sutras called the Utpatya Sambhava Adhikarana, right? Forming the last section in the second part of the second chapter. And this is where Shankara and Ramanuja disagree. Shankara says that this particular discussion in Vedanta Sutras says that the Pancharatra Agama is not bona fide, is not acceptable, whereas Ramanuja proves that it is acceptable. So Yamunacharya, Vedanta Deshika, Ramanuja, they all have defended the Pancharatra Agamas, especially, and the Vaikhanasa Agamas also, all the Agamas for the worship of Vishnu. Shankara approves of all the tenets and rituals of Pancharatra except for the declaration about the so-called birth of the jiva or individual self, which is known as in the system by the name Sankarshana. Okay, so the idea is that what we were talking about, the Vyuha system, Vasudeva, Sankarshana, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha, and each one of them is in charge of a particular aspect of this material nature, and Sankarshana is in charge of the jivas, but this was taken by Shankara to mean that Sankarshana was the origin of the jivas, that the jivas, or the individual souls, the Atmans, right, had a beginning. Whereas we all know that in Vedanta philosophy, according to everybody, even Shankara, the jiva has no beginning like that. Although it's interesting that Shankara should find this to be objectionable, because Shankara's Advaita actually says that impersonal Brahman, right, when covered by Maya, right, with the philosophy or doctrine of superimposition or adhyasa of Maya on Brahman, on impersonal Brahman, causes us to see the jivas. But he doesn't really consider that to be a creation. And normally in Vedanta philosophy, we understand that Chit, Achit, and Ishvara, or the jivas, the souls, the universe of matter, and the Lord are all eternal. So the problem that Shankara had with this particular thing is that since the Pancharatra seems to say that the jivas were created by Sankarshana, right, therefore it can't be accepted because the jiva is eternal and has no creation, no time of creation. So, but in fact, the Pancharatra doesn't say that. This is Shankara's misunderstanding, and so that's pointed out by Ramanuja, Yamuna, and Vedanta Deshika. And therefore they defend Pancharatra as being a system where Sankarshana can be in charge of the jivas, but not the origin of the jivas. So this is because the Vedas hold the jiva to be uncreated, right? Which is what I said. Ramanuja, as pointed out already, has effectively answered this criticism in his Shribhasha in that particular discussion, the Utpatya Sambhava Adhikarana. Okay, so the question may be raised whether this section contemplates any criticism of the Pancharatra. After all, its first sutra, Utpatya Sambhavat, from which we get the whole title of that particular discussion or argument, means only due to the impossibility of birth or production or rise of something, right? That's what the sutra means. Here, there is no reference to the Pancharatra, which seems to be brought in only because some of its texts appear to speak of the creation of the jiva, right? They appear, right? This is Shankara's mistake. The sutra can be directed against any system opposed to the acceptance of Brahman as the cause of the universe. But all the systems of Vedanta accept Brahman as the ultimate cause of the universe. Now, some systems like Madhva's Dvaita don't accept Brahman to be material cause of the universe, only the efficient cause. So there's two types of causes. There's a nimitta karana and there's the upadana karana. The nimitta karana is the efficient cause. The upadana karana is the material cause, right? To give you an example of what a material cause and an efficient cause is, when you make a clay pot, the potter is the efficient cause. The material cause is the clay, right? The potter has to make the pot out of clay, right? But he has to do it. He has to fashion the pot, but he has to do it out of some material. In the case of most schools of Vedanta, the Lord or Ishvara is considered to be, or Brahman, Supreme Brahman, is considered to be both the nimitta and the upadana karana, both the efficient and material cause of everything, right? Whereas in Madhva's philosophy is different from that. And he says, yes, the Lord is the efficient, he's the potter, but he's not the clay also, right? Okay. So it can refer to the hypothesis. The sutra can be directed against any system opposed to the acceptance of Brahman as the cause of the universe. It can refer to the hypothesis of inert Shakti or power being such a cause on the strength of some Upanishadic texts as suggested by Madhva. Okay, so Madhva has this idea like that. So to go more into this, we have to go into Madhva's philosophy, which is beyond the scope of this discussion here. Though this view seems reasonable, it does not explain Ramanuja's stand. Perhaps he thought it necessary to answer the criticisms of Bhaskara and Shankara against Pancharatra. So Bhaskara is one of the acharyas of a great acharya of the Beta school. Shankara, of course, the Kevala Advaita school, or you can just call it the Advaita school. So he demonstrates, in other words, Ramanuja demonstrates that there is no substance in them, because in these arguments against Pancharatra, because the Pancharatra does not hold the jiva to be created. So in other words, this is what we call in disputation or argument, this is called a straw man argument, right? So sometimes people, for instance, if you make a straw person and you put it there and then somebody knocks it down, it's not a very great victory because the straw person couldn't fight back. So in this case, it's also what we call a red herring in English. We say it's something that's beside the point. So because Shankara and perhaps Bhaskara here criticize the Pancharatra for saying that the jiva was created, they're making an argument against something which is false, because the Pancharatra never says that the jiva is created, that the jiva was never created. Its fact is what it says. So therefore, it's not a true criticism, and it's very easy to defeat a straw man argument like this of Bhaskara and Shankara. So his followers uphold his line of treatment in strict adherence to the principle that the strength of a group lies in the unity maintained by the individuals therein, right? So the strength of a group, individuals can be, this is a very common analogy that if we have a bundle of straws, right, it's very difficult to break a bundle of straws, but each individual straw or stick can be broken easily. But when they're bundled together, it's very difficult. So the unity is the strength of these things. So when all of these arguments are put together, they become very unified. But when one of them, if you take one argument and fallaciously say that it means a certain thing which it doesn't, then you can criticize it. Okay, so his followers uphold his line of treatment in strict adherence to the principle that strength of a group lies in the unity maintained by the individuals therein. So all the followers of Ramanuja, all the preceding acharyas of Ramanuja, like Yamunacharya, Ramanuja himself, Vedanta Deshika, and all the acharyas of the Sri Vaishnava line, all the followers of Pancharatra have all maintained the same thing, that this is just a fallacious argument. It's a straw man argument, that the jivas were created, and this is not an argument that we can accept, and therefore we can defeat it very easily because it's a misconception. Okay, so we may also note that Vijnana Bhikshu, and I'm not sure, but I think Vijnana Bhikshu was a Bengali sannyasi, also with a certain type of philosophy, which was like Advaita, who wrote extensively on yoga, but we have to look it up exactly who he was, thinks that this section refutes theories about the origination of Brahman, right? Well, that's interesting. the origination of Brahman rather than the origination of Jiva, which is only considered to be one portion of Brahman, right? So a view that may solve many difficulties. Okay, so we can look that up and we'll have a look at that if we're interested more in that argumentation. The Puranas speak with different voices about Pancharatra: the Vishnu Purana, Bhagavat Purana, Vraha Purana, Brahma Vaivarta Purana, Garuda Purana, Padma Purana, Agni Purana, Linga Purana, Vamana Purana, and some others support Pancharatra. But the Kurma Purana, Vayu Purana, Parashara Purana, I've never heard of Parashara Purana, but anyway, Sambha Purana, and some others attack it. The contents of some Puranas, like the Skanda Purana and the Aditya Purana, are heterogeneous. The contents are heterogeneous means they're different. Such evidence could be neither dismissed nor readily admitted. So it's a mixed bag, what the Puranas say. But most of these Puranas that we have up in that support Pancharatra are all what we call Sattvic Puranas. Puranas for those persons in the mode of goodness. So they accept Pancharatra. Some of these other Puranas here are in the mode of ignorance and passion, so they're not considered to be as important, especially for Vaishnavas. The same diversity of opinion is found in the Kalpa Sutras and the Smritis. So the Kalpa Sutras have to do with the ritualism of the Shrauta, of the Shrauta, the Vedas, Vedic rituals, Vedic sacrifice, and the Smritis have to do with Smarta rituals, like that. So they're the Dharma Shastras. Pancharatra practices are supported by the Kalpa Sutras of Agnivesha, Bodhayana, Daksha, and others. I would say probably Apastamba as well. When we say Bodhayana, then Apastamba probably as well. But condemned by Ashvalayana and others. Well, that's very interesting. Ashvalayana is a Rig Veda sutra, whereas Bodhayana is a Krishna Yajurveda sutra. So it's interesting that some of the Kalpa Sutras support Pancharatra and some of them don't. Okay, similarly, the Smritis, right? So there are different Smritis, right, which are Dharma Shastras, like Manu Smriti or Parashara Smriti, like that. Some Smritis, such as Vishnu Smriti, Shandila Smriti, Vashishta Smriti, Saatapa Smriti, Vridha Vashishta Smriti, and Yoga Yajnavalkya, and others, which you could, Yoga Yajnavalkya is probably otherwise known as Yajnavalkya Smriti, I'm pretty sure, right? And others are in favor, while those of Harita and Yama are against. So that's very interesting, because there is a quote I know from Harita Samhita, which should be part of the Harita Smriti, which has to do with initiation, Vaishnava initiation. So that's interesting. So that's perhaps a subject to go into and do more research to find out exactly why Harita Smriti and Yama Smriti are against the Pancharatra. There are indecisive opinions in Viramitrodaya, which I'm not sure what that shastra is about, and even in Yoga Yajnavalkya and the work of Satatapa. Right, and so for more information about exactly how Pancharatra fares towards Sri Vaishnavism, another good book to look at would be Indian Philosophical Systems by S.M.S. Chari, which is a summary study in English of Vedanta Deshika's, I think it's Adhikarana, Paramata Bhanga. So it talks about all these different schools of thought, including Pancharatra, and how Pancharatra is accepted by the Sri Vaishnava system, and how all of these ideas that Sri Vaishnavism should be separate from Pancharatra are wrong. So in this welter of conflicting opinions, the testimony of early statements made in the Mahabharata, those in the Vishnu Purana and Bhagavad Purana, must be taken to be a primary authority. Okay, so we have Mahabharata, we have Vishnu Purana, we have Bhagavad Purana, and these are our main pramanas for understanding and accepting the Pancharatra system is correct, is bona fide. So let's talk about Ramanuja. The impact of Vaishnava Agamas on Vaishnavism of various schools, claiming a hoary antiquity, and a firm basis in the Vedas, epics, and the Puranas may be seen in important features of their precepts and practices. Right, so let's look at some different practices in the different Vaishnava Sampradayas. The school of Ramanuja was 1017 to 1137 CE, so AD here, right, is most closely linked with Pancharatra. The Agama had influenced Vaishnavism in the south, even before the days of the Alwars. The prevalence of Vaikhanasa temples in the region from the earliest period attests to the influence of the Vaikhanasa Agama also. So Pancharatra and Vaikhanasa Agama are old, and they influenced the temple worship in the south, and even the house worship after the time of Ramanuja, like that. Now it's interesting because we see some North Indian influences in different Pancharatra Samhitas, and many people believe that many of the Pancharatra Samhitas were written in North India. So to see them not being used so much in North India anymore, but mainly in South India, is very interesting. So the Vishishtadvaita system of Vedanta, expounded authoritatively by Ramanuja, has won recognition all over India, but its followers are most numerous in the region now comprising the states of Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, and Karnataka, right? So, which would also include Telangana right now. Andhra was split into two states, Andhra Pradesh and Telangana. So Karnataka and Tamil Nadu, not particularly Kerala, where Advaita Vedanta is more prevalent, because Shankara is from Kerala, and not in the rest of North India. So it has some centers in the north, like Pushkar in Rajasthan, and Vrindavan in Uttar Pradesh. Right. The life of the Vaishnavas of the Ramanuja school is also uniform in all these places, except for a few variations. For a few small variations, right? So the temples here are regulated either by the Pancharatra or the Vaikhanasa Agamas. They all observe the custom of reciting the songs of the Alwars, which is a sort of universal rule amongst the school of the Vaishnavas, though the Agamas do not directly enjoin it. In general, the cosmological speculations of the Agamas have not had much impact on Vishishtadvaita Vaishnavism, on their philosophy, although their philosophy has exerted influence on it. The religious life of the Vaishnavas has been deeply influenced by the Pancharatra, right? As we talked about how the Vaishnavas are living their lives, basic daily lives, according to those Panchakala Kriyas, so activities which are done at 5 times of the day. So the Abhigamana, Upadana, Ija, Swadhyaya, and Yoga, right? Which we talked about before. So, nevertheless, this influence is not all-inclusive. In several matters, they prefer to follow the dicta, or the dicta is dictums plural, of the Smritis, or the Dharmashastras, right, which have to do with the Varnashrama system. This is evident from, to take one example, the differences of opinion based on the Smriti texts in regard to fixing of the annual calendar important festivals like Sri Jayanti, Krishna Janmastami, Sri Ramanavami, Narasimha Jayanti, Shravana Dwadasi, and others. A striking feature of Vaishnavism is the growing conviction from the time of Ramanuja onwards that it is an imperative duty to worship every day the icon in the temple or the icon or shalagrama at home. This mode of worship has gained importance as part of the Bhakti movement. The earlier tradition of the Upanishads appears to have been to something, the gaining of knowledge concerning God through a life of discipline, abstract thinking, and meditation. So eminent sages like Vyasa, Narada, and others, out of humanitarian zeal, sought to ease an easier approach to God, relying on the assurances of the Lord in the Bhagavad Gita. They taught bhakti to be the easiest as well as the surest means to realize God. At this stage, the Agamas came forward with directions for worshipping God in the finitized form of icons or deities in temples. They too were animated by the zeal to serve humanity and help them in their troubles and afflictions. The Vaishnava Agamas have made a significant contribution towards this. It is noteworthy that there are relatively more Vishnu temples in Tamil Nadu than in other states. The importance given to Ramanuja and his followers to the worship of temples accounts for the large number of Vaishnava families living in the neighborhood of temples in places like Tirumalai, meaning Tirupati, the Tirumala, Srirangam, Kanchipuram, Kumbakonam, and others. The temple festivals in these places draw large crowds year after year. On other days, also, pious persons feel it an obligatory duty to make at least one visit to the temple every day and offer their services to God according to their capacity. This tendency has influenced to a considerable extent the daily life of the Vaishnavas generally, and particularly in the places mentioned above, and others like Tiruvallikeni, which means Triplicane, the suburb of Madras, where the Parthasarathy temple is, in Madras or Chennai city, right? Manargudi, which has the Rajagopala deity temple there. Alwar Tirunagari, which is in the very south in Tirunelveli district of Tamil Nadu. And Melkote, which is in the Mysore district of, or Manji district of Karnataka, so near to Mysore. Though yogic practices are dealt with in both of the agamas, meaning Vaikanasa and Pancharatra, stress is laid primarily on upasana or worship, particularly of God in the form of deities or icons. It is declared as the means for pleasing and approaching God. The elements of property or surrender, Nyasa Vidya, entered into it as it is the acknowledged form of salvation. Music and dance are an essential part of the worship of God, particularly in temples. This receives emphasis in the Pancharatra. It is also mentioned in the Puranas. Dance is now not permitted in the temples, right? And music is confined to the playing of pipes or nadashwaram with the drum tavil, which is sort of like a South Indian Shania, like that. The reason why he mentions here that dance is not permitted in temples anymore is because there was a cult during the British Raj time, the time when the British ruled India. There was still the dance going on in the temples, and there was a specific group of women who were dancing in the temples called Devidasis. But due to the prevalence in some places of temple prostitution, the British closed that down and banned that. And so it never really came into vogue again like that. But in the old days, there used to be dancing in the temple by these Devidasis. And sometimes they were not married and they were considered to be the wives of the deity of the temple, like that. Very famously in Jagannath Puri, I think probably the last Devidasis was still there in the Puri Jagannath temple. But in any case, this whole thing was outlawed by the British as being immoral. So the flute, lute, etc., are now not in use. So there were some other things. We do find in the Sri Rangam temple that they do have the Veena Seva. They do have people playing the Veena, which is a stringed instrument like that still. But in most places in South India, you'll find that they just play this Nadashwaram, which is a type of oboe type flute or a pipe that people play, and with a drum called a tavil, like that. In Kerala, of course, which is not governed by the Pancharatra or the Vaikanasa Agamas, they have their own Agamas there. They tend to use the music that they use is called Panchavadyam, and they have big cymbals, and they have all sorts of they have horns and cymbals, as well as the pipes and the drums and things like that. Okay, so the 4,000 hymns of the Alwars, according to tradition, were set to music by Natamuni. By the way in which they are now recited in the temple, but the way that in which they are now recited in the temple is not musical, right? It is easy to guess that the musical mode was lost or abandoned at some time. Among the factors contributing to this might have been the feeling that concentration on music might lead to the neglect of the meaning and even the devotional fervor. This is his speculation, and that the recitation of the hymns in the temples would be restricted to those having musical talent and training. Well, that's an idea. Okay, so likewise, the Bhajana Goshti, or the group kirtan or bhajan, singing songs, spiritual songs to the Lord, or choral group singing songs in praise of God, is not in high favor in South India, right? Whereas in North India it is. Even then, in South India there are some groups, but not so much in the Sri Vaishnava Sampradaya, but they do have some of these groups that sing bhajans at particular festivals, not normally in the temple, but sometimes during the car processions, the Rath cart processions, the Rath Yatras, or at some other functions like at what they call Radha Kalyanams and different things that happen in people's houses like that. There is a type of bhajana sampradaya that goes on in Sri Vaishnavism, but it's much less than in the Smarta Sampradaya and also other Vaishnava Sampradayas. So it seems to be tolerated on occasions like Dhanurmasam. Dhanurmasam means the month of Margali, which is December 15th to January 15th, where people sing the songs of Tirupavai of Andal, the 30 songs of Andal, and annual festival processions, which I said, so when there's processions, sometimes there are bhajan groups that go around. The emphasis is on service to God in temples in some capacity or other, service to devotees or bhagavatas, and passionately witnessing celebrations of festivals. So that's in the Sri Vaishnava Sampradaya, followers of Ramanuja. Now, what about the followers of Madhva? What about those Vaishnavas who follow Madhvacharya, the Dvaita Vedanta, like that? What is the influence of Pancharatra on them? So in addition to Ramanuja, 3 other teachers in South India have made considerable contributions to Vaishnavism. Madhva of Karnataka, Nimbarka and Ballabha, both from Andhra Pradesh. All of them have been influenced by Pancharatra and the Puranas. Ramanuja differs from the others in coming under the influence of the Alwars also. So these other 3, Madhva, Nimbarka, and Ballabha, they weren't so much interested in the prayers of the Alwars, probably because none of them came from Tamil Nadu or spoke Tamil. They, in the case of Madhva, he spoke Tulu or Kannada, and the people in Andhra Pradesh spoke Telugu. So Ramanuja differs from the others in coming under the influence of the Alwars also. Among the forms of God, these teachers give special importance to the Archa, or means the deity in the temple, and Vibhava avatars, right? Vibhava is the avatars like the Das avatars, the different avatars, the sense of the Lord. Madhvacharya 1199 to 1277 CE belonged to Udupi, which is just 1 hour north of Mangalore on the west coast of South India, below Goa and above Trivandrum. So he wrote in what's called Dakshina Kannada district of Karnataka, just across from Mysore, across the mountains from Mysore, across what's called the Western Ghats, the mountains that separate that part from the rest of the Deccan Plateau in South India. He wrote a number of works on philosophy and religion, demonstrating the ultimate supremacy of Vishnu. So he wrote books like Vishnu Tattva Vinirnaya, etc., right, which we can read. So if we're interested in Madhva's Tantra Sar Sangraha, was his ritualistic book. He also wrote another one, Sadachar Smriti, about daily works. Okay, here's Tantra Sar Sangraha. Here it goes. Tantra Sar Sangraha treats in 4 chapters the practical aspects of Vaishnavism. Pranava, which means the Omkara, the Vedic syllable Om, is stated to denote Brahman, the Supreme, right, who is identical with Vishnu. The Astakshara, again, just like the Sri Vaishnavas or Ramanujis, Om Namo Narayanaya, the 8-syllable mantra, is the source of all mantras and is the most important among them. So the Madhvas and the Sri Vaishnavas both agree on this. The Savitri, meaning the Gayatri mantra from the Brahma Gayatri or Savitri Gayatri mantra from the Rig Veda, Tat Savitavare Inyam Bargode Vasitivahi Dioyo Napachodeya Ate, right? That is said to have sprung from the Astakshara, recited twice. Oh, so that's interesting. So the Astakshara is 8 syllables. When it's When it's doubled, it makes it 16 syllables. That's interesting because Gayatri is usually understood to be 24 syllables, right? 3 times 8. Tatsavadarenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yona Prachodayat. So I'm not quite sure what he means by that, but we can look up. It says there, there's a footnote, so we'll see what the footnote refers to. Nyasa, right? Nyasa is described for mantras and letters. So in Madhva Vaishnavism, they also perform this nyasa of touching different parts of the body and placing. Nyasa means placing, right? It also means surrender, but it means placing these syllables on different parts of the body. So different mantras and letters are placed on different parts of the body in Madhva Sampradaya. God Vishnu is to be worshipped in the Chakrabja Mandala. So Chakrabja Mandala is also described in the Pancharatra, in many of the Samhitas of the Pancharatra. It's a mandala, which represents the whole universe with different deities in different parts of it. So sort of looks like a big yantra. And it's called Chakrabja because it has in the middle a lotus, and then it has a wheel outside. So the Abja is the lotus and Chakra is the wheel. So is worshipped in the Chakrabja Mandala. The Chakrabja Mandala, however, used by the Madhvas is different from the one used by the Sri Vaishnavas coming from Pancharatra directly. But it's mentioned there in Tantra Sar Sangraha. The Chakrabja Mandala, the heart, the mountains, water, or the ground. Vishnu is to be worshipped in those different places, right? It can be worshipped in the heart, it can be worshipped in mountains, he can worship in water, and also on the ground. So the conch, discus, and such other things are emblems of Vishnu, which is also understood in Sri Vaishnava Sampradaya, who is said to have 2 consorts, Lakshmi or Sri Devi, and Bhudevi or Bhumi Devi, the goddess of the earth, the goddess of fortune, the goddess of the earth. The materials for making images or deities, right, their detailed measurements and other particulars are given in chapter 3. We're still talking about here Tantra Sar Sangraha by Madhvacharya, right, as also the procedure for consecration or pratishta, or installing those deities. The 4 vyuhas, Vasudeva, Sankarsana, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha from Pancharatra, are also mentioned. This work clearly shows that Madhva was closely following the Pancharatra tradition and deeply learned in the lore of the mantras or mantra shastra. The Vishnu Rahasya, Rahasya meaning secrets, so secrets about Vishnu. Usually Rahasya also means mantras, right? Because mantras are typically secret. So the Vishnu Rahasya that he often cites describes fully the worship of deities, particularly those of Vishnu. Deities are of 2 kinds, Chala and Achala, movable and immovable. The former is said to be the Vaishnava Brahman. The former, the Chala, is said to be the Vaishnava Brahman. So we can, as an analogy, we can say the Brahman moves around, so he's sort of like a movable deity, like that. In Varnashram, the Brahmins are considered to be the highest caste, so they're worshipable. So here is that quote from Vishnu Rahasya. It says, Chala chala vibhedena pratima dithayam mama chala tu Vaishnavo vipro dvividatva chala mataha or mata. Vishnu Rahasya 10.2. Very simple translation. Is easy to understand, right? It's basically saying that the Brahman's like a movable deity. The statement that the Vaishnava Brahman is the Chala form of the Lord may mean no more than that he should receive worship as if he were divine. Yes, that's what it means. Because the worship of the devotee is pleasing to the Supreme Lord, Sriman Narayana. Since this is not made clear, a conservative interpretation or a literal interpretation would be that the text is merely eulogistic, suggesting that the Vaishnava Brahmins should be honorably treated, right? And that idea of 5:15:22, which had to do with the Astakshara doing twice, is coming from something which is coming from Tantra Sar Sangraha. Then in Tantra Sar Sangraha by Madhva, apparently that says that in page 14 or text 14. And we have here 15:27 is pleasing to the Lord, and you could also see an equivalent idea coming in Rahasya Traya Sara of Vedanta Deshika 1:489 to 490, where the passage is cited from the Padmottara, which was probably Padma Purana. There are the two achala or immovable forms, types of deities are considered of two types. One is called sahaja, naturally formed, and the other is ahita, consecrated, right? So we have this self-manifesting, or otherwise called swayam vyakta, deity, and the other is called the ahita, or the consecrated one, which is installed or given pratishta. Of these, the Sahaja Pratima may be a tirtha, a sacred river like the Ganga or the Ganges, or a holy tank like that one at Pushkara, right, in Rajasthan. A Kshetra, or a sacred place like Prayaga, Kashi, Kurukshetra, or Badari, or even like the forest at Jarikanda, you know, or the forest, the forest where the sages were at. In the Bhagavatam, there's a forest of it's considered to be sacred. Anyway, the forest, it's immovable, right? Or it could be, or Badrikashram, or it could be a deity found in the earth at a particular spot, or Shila, although the Shila's not Achala, it's not immovable, it's movable. A Shalagram, which requires no consecration to be worshipped, no installation. All are qualified to worship this form. All are qualified to worship this type of form, right? According to Madhva, right? So worship in the temple has to be performed thrice every day, according to Madhva. Only Brahmins are said to be capable of offering worship there in the temple, but not in the house. Even amongst them, learned though they may be, certain blemishes of character or conduct act as disqualifications. So not only do you have to be a Brahmin to worship in the temple in Madhva Sampradaya, but you also have to be of good conduct and good character, like that, and learned. So stress is laid on mano yoga, or it could be maru yaga. Yaga means sacrifice. Yoga means another thing. It means a connection with the Lord. Manu means manaha, means the mind, by the mind, the fervor and sincerity of devotion. So in a lot of stress in Madhva Sampradaya is placed on into the internal mental worship. Without this, observance of external formalities is a mere show. And I think all Vaishnavas agree on this, even the Sri Vaishnavas and whatever other Sampradayas as well. So Madhva's is just in line with everybody else in saying this. Hence, worship is said to be both internal and external. The former is done within the mind, and the dangers involved in its performance by those with uncontrolled minds is vividly described. This is in Tantra Sangraha. Remember, the main ritualistic book of the Madhva Sampradaya. The latter is to be done with the physical body, right? The external worship, and using wealth and other possessions for performing homa or fire sacrifice and extending charity. So, though the Vishnu Rahasya does not deal with the construction of temples, other important aspects of Pancharatra are discussed and described. This may explain why Madhvacharya quotes frequently from the Vishnu Rahasya and why it has enjoyed the favor of writers owing allegiance to the Dvaita system of Madhva, right? But it must be different from the Pancharatra text having the same name. So there might be a Pancharatra text also called Vishnu Rahasya, and Madhva seems to be a different one. In spite of the importance attached by the followers of Madhva to temple worship, there do not seem to be many temples governed by them. The temple at Udupi is under the control of pontiffs of 8 different mutts coming from the lineages of the 8 different disciples of Madhva. There, each of whom takes charge of the temple, the main temple of Sri Krishna, Udupi Krishna, for 2 years in turn. This is called a paryaya, right, in which they take turns. Right, the idols or the deities of the mutts at places like Mantralaya in Kurnool district in Andhra Pradesh, in Tirukotilur in Koyalur in Tamil Nadu, are worshipped by ascetics or sannyasis there according to the Pancharatra. Festivals are celebrated in the temple at Udupi with processions, but there is no chorus of Vedic chanters following the deity. The ascetic himself, the sannyasi himself, offers the holy water used for worship to the disciples and the congregation. The arnika, The Anika, meaning the daily rites of Madhvas, right, mentioned above, is informative of the daily life of Madhvas, right? And again, I said there's a short work called Sarachar Shmiti by Madhva that deals with this Anika for Madhvas, right? Just as Ramanuja wrote the Nitya Grantha for his followers. All the acts should be undertaken only for pleasing Vishnu. They form part of the worship. The worshipper should wear on his forehead a tilak of sandalwood paste in the form of an urdhva pundram. An urdhva pundram. So you see Madhvas, they wear, it's usually done with gopi chandan or with chandan, like that. And in the form of a flame of a lamp in other places. So sometimes they also put this black dupashesha line in the middle, whereas the Sri Vaishnavas put red or yellow in the middle, representing Lakshmi. This seems to be an attempt to reconcile the differing rules in the Ishvara, Parameshya, and Naradiya Samhitas for wearing the mark on the forehead. Curiously enough, there's no mention of the pundra as the form of the Lord's foot, right? We can also see Lakshmi Tantra in the introduction. It is not, however, clear that a work having this name, that is the Vishnu Rahasya, according to Shraddha, right? And so we have another book also by Madhva called Krishnamrita Maharnava, which determines the day of the Krishna Janmashtami festival. So the use of sacred mud from Sri Rangam, Dwarka, Sri Kurmam, Shimadri, Prayaga, Varaha, Sri Mushnam, and groves of Tulsi, along with holy water for the worship of shalagrams, is allowed. While performing Achamana, the names of 4 Vyuha deities should also be uttered, along with the 12 names of Vishnu, beginning with Keshava, right? So the Madhvas have this, they chant Om Keshava to Damodar, Om Keshavaya Namaha, Narayana Namaha, Madhavaya Namaha, etc., up to Damodaraya Namaha, and then they chant Om Sankarshanaya Namaha, Om Vasudevaya Namaha, Om Pradyumnaya Namaha, Om Aniruddhaya Namaha in that order, for some reason, and not the Vasudeva, Sankarsana, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha in the normal order that Pancharatra puts them. So he's just saying here in the Achamana that those are the names which are used. And in fact, in Madhva Sampradaya, they actually use like up to 24 names, just like the Gaudiya Achamana does. So, except that there's that difference in the Vasudeva and Sankarsana are switched around in the Madhva Sampradaya. The followers of Madhva observe the sacrament of tapa, meaning branding the symbols with the body with the symbols of Vishnu, by getting their shoulder blades, right, chest and above the navel for the men, right, 2 for the women and 1 for the child, maybe one chakra over the navel, and 5 for men usually. The followers of Madhva observe the sacrament of tapa by getting their shoulder blades branded with the heated metal emblems of the conch and discus. But this is done on the Dwadasi, or after the Lord goes to sleep for Chatumasya, which is called Shaina Dwadasi. So it is their belief that the marks on the shoulders should not be allowed to fade out. So many impress every day with sandalwood paste the forms of conch and discus with urdhva pundra, not merely on the shoulder blades, but also on the chest, arms, etc. And there's a special method of doing this. There's actually, Madhvas have a thing called panchamudras, where they have mudras or stamps, metal stamps made for all 4 symbols, Shankha, Chakra, Gada, and Padma, or the discus, the conch, the lotus, and the mace of Vishnu, and they press them in different parts of the body with gopi chandana. But also next to each one of them, they also put the 5th stamp, which has got the Astakshara mantra on it, Om Namo Narayanaya. And there's a certain procedure from the Puranas which explains this. If anybody's interested, they can get in touch with me. I have a chart which shows a person and where to place all of them and what mantras to use, like that. So the Anika details, the daily routine details of Madhvas, procedure for worship, and describes the puja mandapa, the place where you do the puja in the house, where it's to be performed. Worship is to be offered with devotion even to Ananta, the Adishesha, the celestial serpent of Vishnu, Garuda, his winged golden eagle carrier, and others forming the retinue of God. After snapana, or bathing of the deity, the Dwadasa stotras of Madhva are to be recited. So there's a thing called Dwadasa stotra, which is, Dwadasa means 12, and so it's a stotra of 12 verses. which was written by Madhva. That has to be recited after the bathing of the deity. Vessels containing food to be offered must be placed on the Bijaksha of Shri, written on decorating designs made of colored flour on the floor and consecrated with the Mula Mantra. Okay, so Mula Mantra is Om Namo Narayanaya. So they consecrate these vessels for offering the food, which they place on what's called ranguli or kolam. It's rice flour designs on the floor, and this should be a rice flour design showing the Bijaksha or the seed mantra of Lakshmi, Shri or Shrim. The mantras for offering food. The mantras for offering food consist of the names of the 5 vital heirs in association with Aniruddha, Pradyumna, Sankarsana, Vasudeva, and Narayana. So Aniruddha, Pradyumna, Sankarsana, Vasudeva, and Narayana. So Pranaya Swa, Mapanaya Swa, Vyanaya Swa, Udanaya Swa, Samanaya Swa, with those 5 names of the Lord. The Mula Mantra must be uttered for Brahman. So we have Pranaya Swa, Mapanaya Swa, Vyanaya Swa, Udanaya Swa, Samanaya Swa, Brahmani Swaha is how they're offering food. So up unto Brahman. So the Jitante Stotra, which is also known in Pancharatra, which we talked about before, of 5 sections, is then to be recited. Now, it's unclear to me whether because I haven't studied it in detail, whether the Chitante Stotra used by the Madhvas is the same one used in Pancharatra. But we'll see. After performing Vaishvadeva is offering into the household fire of the food after it's been offered to the Lord, like that, before the householder will take food himself. The preceptor, so after performing Vaishvadeva, the preceptor, the guru, Brahmins, and the retinue of Vishnu have to be worshipped. So one has to worship his guru, he has to worship the Brahmins, and he has to worship the different parishads or the different attendants of Vishnu, like that, consorts and attendants. After completing the worship, one must draw on his forehead the straight black line using charcoal from the incense offered. So when we offer incense, they don't offer just a stick. Mostly in South India, they'll offer charcoals made of hot pieces of wood or charcoal, and they become like brittle, and then mixed with a little bit of water, taking a stick and putting a black line. This is called dupashesh, or what's left over from the dupa or the incense offering to God. Dupashesh is put on in between the Udva Pundra tilak, that the Madhvas put with Gopi Chandan. So after completing the worship, one must draw on the forehead a straight black line using charcoal from the incense offered on the pundra or sandal paste. Right. So thus the Pancharatra is held in high esteem by the Madhvas as the best amongst Shastras. And here he gives another quotation from Vishnu Rahasya 7:32-33. So in accordance with its dictates, they use the Pista Pasu in sacrifices. A Pista Pashu, Pista means making dough, right? Sometimes we see these Pista Deeps. You get rice flour, right? Or you could use some other sort of a flour like that, and you add water and you make it into a type of dough. You make an impression in the top of it and fill it with oil or ghee and a wick like this, and offer it as a lamp like that. So here we're talking about a Pishta Pashu. A Pishta Pashu is a dough shaped into the form of an animal. A Pashu is an animal, which is used in sacrifices. So Madhvas also believe that they can perform these animal sacrifices, but in Kali Yuga, in the particular age now, they don't actually kill the animal, but they offer animals made of dough or pishtapashu into the sacrifice. They hold that even kamya rituals are to be performed without expectation of reward when they become akamya, pleasing to the Lord, right? So Kamya rituals are not usually performed by the Sri Vaishnavas. Kamya ritual means a ritual where we want some material benefit or material fruit to accrue to us from doing that ritual. So it's not usually done by Sri Vaishnavas because they're completely surrendered to the Lord and they don't want anything from the Lord like that. They just want to perform the service of the Lord for the pleasure of the Lord and because of his order in the scriptures. So there's different types of rites that are performed, rituals that are performed. So we have Nitya, Naimittika, and Kamya. Nitya rituals have to be performed. In other words, if you don't perform them, like Sandhya Vandanam, sin is incurred if you don't perform them for non-observance of them. Naimittika is occasional occasional different, like Ekadasi or Purnima. There's different rituals that come once in a while. And then the Kami rituals are because of a specific desire that arises in the mind. Normally, Sri Vaishnavas don't do it, these Kami rituals, but the Madhvas say they hold that even Kami rituals are to be performed without expectation of reward. So they should be done, but again, the fruit should be given up. The idea of getting the fruit should be given up when they become akamya, or without desire, pleasing to the Lord. So this brings into mind the verse in the Bhagavatam, Akama Samakamo Va Mokshakama Udaradi Tivrena Bhakti Yogena Yajeta Purusham Param. So in the process of bhakti yoga, all sorts of people can benefit, even those who have desires or who've given up desires. So when you become akamya, it means you've given up that desire, that material desire. You no longer have the material desire. So the Madhvas say, even though you have no longer a material desire, you can still perform those sacrifices or rituals which are meant for material desires. You just give up the fruit of those things, of those actions. So while doing an act, particularly any act that the Veda enjoins, one must have knowledge, devotion, and detachment. So that's the point. So we should have knowledge about all these things, perform them, Madhva says, according to the scriptures, with devotion, bhakti yoga, right? And detachment from getting any result like that. So that's a quotation from Madhva's Karma Nirnaya. So if we continue on, so that's what he says, such acts should never be given up. Karma Nirnaya, was it Krishnamrita Maharnava? That's also that other. So that's how the Madhvas look at it. Now, how do the Nimbarkas look at Pancharatra? Or what influence is there of Pancharatra on the Nimbarka Sampradaya, right? Nimbarka, circa 1200 AD, right, or CE, born in Andhra Pradesh and originally called Bhaskaracharya, right, was an ascetic or a sannyasin, reputed to be an avatar of the sun god. Sriman Narayana is a sun god, right? Narayana within the sun is Surya Narayana, who put down heretics, right? So defeated heretics. A story about his, some other people call him an avatar of Sudarshana, right? A story about his Nimbaditya, the sun. Nimbaditya, maybe not Sudarshana, but Nimbaditya. Aditya means the sun. So a story about his name, Nimbarka, relates to a miracle. Once he played host to a Jain ascetic, a Jain sannyasin, right, with whom he was having a philosophical debate. Suddenly he realized that they had debated till the sun was about to set. As neither of them had taken food, could take food after sunset, he made the sun stand still in its course, asking the Jain to wait under a nimba tree, right? Nimba tree, and serving food to him there. Hence the name Nimb Arka. Arka means the sun, or Nimb Aditya. Aditya means the sun. So Nimba meaning the Nim tree, right? Nimbarka or Nimbaditya is therefore his name. Niyamanandacharya is also another name of Nimbarka. The sect founded by him is also called the Hamsa Sampradaya, after the incarnation of Vishnu as a swan, who taught the Veda to Brahma. In the same form, he taught the pure tradition to Sanaka, Sanandana, Sanatana, and Sanat Kumara, the four brahmacharian sons of Brahma, right? Nimbarka received it from Narada. So this is the Sampradaya like that, from Hamsa Bhagavan to Sanakadi, Sanaka, Sananda, Sanatana, and Sanat Kumaras, then coming down to Narada Muni, and then from Narada to Nimbarka, like that. His cult is known as the Sanat Kumara Narada Sampradaya. So here's an excerpt from Keshava Kashmiri Bhattas, who was a Nimbarkacharya on Bhagavad Gita, and this is the commentary, which talks about the Guru Parampara of Nimbarka, like that. Okay, so among the followers of Nimbarka are both householders and recluses. So they have both sannyasis, and they also have householders as part of the Nimbarka Sampradaya. They're largely found in Upper India or Northern India, near Mathura and in Bengal. They wear the Urdhva Pundra, so they also wear Urdhva Pundra, with white earth or sandal paste offered to God, with a circular black mark in the center. So if you see people without the leaf on the end, but just an Urdhva Pundra with a black dot, those people are Nimbarkis. Right. They also wear a necklace of Tulsi beads. Radha Krishna are worshipped by them. Right. So Nimbarka's philosophy, and strictly speaking, we, as far as I'm concerned, it seems like the Nimbarka Sampradaya has got much more influence on what the Gaudiya Sampradaya, came out more from the Nimbarka Sampradaya than any other Sampradaya, because it seems like that. Anyway, Nimbarka's philosophy can be described as Swabhavika Beta Beta. So it's a type of Beta Beta, but it's Swabhavika or natural. So it makes a wonderful arrangement of conflicting metaphysical views. It seems an adaptation of the tenets of the ancient thinker Odalomi, referred to in the Brahma Sutras. It admits Dvaita, right? Beta Beta means Dvaita, difference and non-difference, right? Between phenomena and noumena, and Beta Beta between the self and Brahman, right? Difference and non-difference, who is both Saguna and Nirguna. So both with both Saguna, with qualities, and without qualities. Brahman is the abode of auspicious, this may seem contradictory, right? Brahman is the abode of auspicious qualities, free from imperfections, and both the material and instrumental, again, the Upadan Karana and the Nimitta Karana, cause of the universe. The immanent Shakti of Brahman is responsible for creation. It is further held that Brahman is Radha Krishna, having a dual spiritual form made of beauty and bliss. The 6 gunas, which we talked about before, the 6 main qualities of God, which we talked about before, listed by the Pancharatra, are among Brahman's innumerable qualities, thus testifying to the influence of the Pancharatra Agamas, or the Agamas in general, on Nimbarka. Prapati, or self-surrender, right, is the path to moksha, which is open to all. So this is the Nimbarkas also talk about surrender or prapati. Self-surrender to the grace of God is the most important of the 6 elements, right? So there are 6 elements which are spoken of again in that sloka that we have from from the Aryabhuta Samhita, and also from the Lakshmi Tantra, Anukulyasa Sankalpa, Pratikulyasa Vajana, etc. So there are these 6 angas of Sharanagati or surrender, which are spoken about. And so out of all of them, the actual Sharanagati or the surrender is the most important. Devotion to Radha Krishna deepens into intense love, evoking a revelation of God's blissful nature and leading to moksha or liberation. The friendship of the gopis should be sought. So one should feel like he's a servant of the gopis or a friend of the gopis, like that. Sayujya, which means very, very close contact and service to the Lord, and Brahma Anubhava, which means the pure realization of the bliss of the soul, right, characterizes moksha. So these are the characteristics of moksha according to Nimbarka. Nimbarka wrote the Dasa Shloki, which means 10 slokas or 10 verses, a brief conspectus of his system, and a commentary on the Brahma Sutras called the Vedanta Parijata Shorabha. If anybody wants a copy of the Vedanta Parijata Shorabha in English, they can just email me, or they can send WhatsApp text to the number coming at the end of the video, and we can send you a download link. You can download Vedanta Parijata Shorabha by Nimbarka, and it also has purports by the scholar Professor Bose, who translated it, comparing it to the other commentaries of the other Vedanta acharyas like Ramanuja Madhva, etc. So his immediate disciple Srinivasacharya, right, commented on it in Vedanta Kostuba, which is his commentary, which received another commentary to it called Kostuba Prabha from Keshava Kashmiri Bhatta, right, who is said to have debated with Lord Chaitanya, but in fact who lived at a different time with Chaitanya, Sri Chaitanya, like that. So Devacharya explained the Brahma Sutras. Nimbarka's lines in Siddhanta Janavi, which is a super commentary, Setu by Sundara Bhatta, Vaishnavamali Mishra discusses the system in detail in his Vedanta Siddhanta Sangraha, also known as Shruti Siddhanta, in 7 chapters. The Bhagavad Gita is interpreted according to Nimbarka by Keshava Kashmiri Bhatta in his commentary called Tattva Prakashika. So all of these things, some of them may be available also in English if people are interested. Nimbarka holds Krishna associated with Radha to be the supreme reality. Hayagriva, or the horse-headed incarnation of Vishnu, is specially mentioned in the Shruti Siddhanta. The 3 ultimate principles, Brahman, Krishna, Chit, the self, and Achit, inert matter, are real, co-eternal, and both different and non-different from one another. And here's a quote from Vedanta Parijata Shorba 2:122, explaining that. Brahman's auspicious qualities and freedom from imperfections are stressed. So see, for example, his Dasa Sloki number 4, given here, like that. There are many similarities between the systems of Ramanuja and Nimbarka. Property and the elements and its elements, right, which we talked about, the 6 elements of Sharanagati, right, Anukulyasya Sankalpa, are common to both. Sayuja characterizes moksha in both systems, in Sri Vaishnava system and Nimbarka system. And Sayuja in this case doesn't mean impersonal liberation. Sayuja means very intimate, close contact and service to God, a relationship of close contact between God and the soul. Inert matter is of 3 kinds: immutable, aprakrita; mutable, which would be prakrita; and time, which is kala, usually kala. Brahman is Vishnu, and his body is eternal. Brahma and Rudra are, in other words, Brahma and Shiva, or Rudra, are subordinate to Vishnu. Vishvaksena, Garuda, and many other eternally free souls attend to Lord Vishnu. The main purpose of his descents or avatars on this earth is only to enable his devotees to have intimate communion with him. The term Maya, or that which is not, or illusion, is understood as knowledge, right? So certain Maya is a certain type of knowledge, like that. Keshava Kashmiri Bhatta's Bhagavad Gita Bhashya 4:6, similar views have been advanced by Ramanuja earlier. The Gita's main teachings is the doctrine of self-surrender, according to Nimbarkis. The often quoted commentary thereupon observes, this is the commentary on Bhagavad Gita 1873, which is practically the last verse of Bhagavad Gita, like that. So the similar views of the Ramanuja school have been referred to earlier in this book about what the Gita actually teaches as its final teaching. Ramanuja's methodology seems to have influenced Nimbarka, as may be seen particularly in his commentary on the Brahma Sutras. Though Ramanuja again, through Ramanuja again, he must have come under the Pancharatra influence. The system is not directly mentioned by him, but in other words, by Nimbarka, but he uses the word vyuhangin, which means about believing in the anga, or the limbs, or the vyuha system. Similarly, Srinivasacharya, the disciple of Nimbarka, right, and mentions sadgunya, meaning the 6 different qualities or main qualities of the Lord, without referring to the Agamas, the Pancharatra Agamas, where it comes from. But Keshava Kashmiri Bhatta cites passages from the texts of the system which is mentioned by name. So Keshava Kashmiri Bhatta certainly mentions Pancharatra by name. According to Vaishnavamati Mishra, the Pancharatra is the best amongst the source books. Manusmriti and other authoritative texts are based upon it, right? So he says that Manusmriti and other Dharmashastras are actually based on Pancharatra. I find that difficult to believe because they do differ in many ways, right? So he refers to the 4 vyuhas, this Vaishnavamati Mishra. Charting the course of the soul attaining release, he says that it proceeds from Aniruddha, then to Pradyumna, then to Sankarsana, and then finally to Vasudeva, the Paramatman. So this is a progression. The 5-fold sacrament, or otherwise the Panchasamskara, or the initiation, is described in detail, Pancharatric initiation, and enjoined as obligatory, or a must for all Nimbarkis. They also have to take initiation in the same way as other Vaishnavas that follow Pancharatra. So they believe in the Tapta Mudras and everything, although maybe they don't practice Tapta Mudra Dharanam, the branding of the body with symbols of Vishnu themselves these days. I'm not sure. Nimbarka, but I have a book on Nimbarka ritualism, which does talk about, gives all the pramanas from the Vedas for branding with the symbols of Vishnu, but maybe they don't do it anymore. I'm not sure. Nimbarka and his followers accept the Pancharatra wholeheartedly. He does not take pains to controvert views questioning the Agamas authority, or to reject the theory that the Brahma Sutra section at the end of chapter 2, part 2 of the Brahma Sutras is against the creation of the universe by Shakti without the control of God. So in other words, Shakti, yes, Shakti can be the creation of the universe by Shakti, but the Shakti is controlled by God. Srinivasacharya also does not refer to these controversies, right? And we had a footnote here, which is interesting. Say for instance, in Dasaslogi 4, the word is taken by the commentator Purshottama, pupil of Srinivasacharya, to mean the four viewers, and also several kinds of divine descents, like the Purusha avatar, the Guna avatar, and the Lila avatar. Giridhari Prapanna, in his commentary, gives a brief account, etc. Okay, so those Srinivasa also does not refer to these controversies. But Keshava Kashmiri Bhatta adopts Ramanuja's views on the matter. He stresses particularly the authority of the Mahabharata in this matter. There is an ingenious suggestion by him that if Vyasa criticized the Pancharatra, it must have been some other school of thought which is of the same name. Okay, so if some people come up with the idea or the criticism that Vyasa criticized Pancharatra, then maybe he was talking about some other thing but Pancharatra, the actual Pancharatra as we know it. Nimbarka's followers, however, do not adopt temple worship. They have implicit faith in their preceptors, who are grihastas and recluses or sannyasins. Perhaps the worship of deities conducted in their mutts by leading preceptors is adopted by their followers. So they don't actually have temples per se, but they have mutts and they have deities in those things. So this is interesting. I find that a little bit difficult to believe. It does seem like in Vrindavan they do have temples. Nimbarki Sampradaya does have temples. Okay, so now to the influence of Pancharatra on the Vallabha Sampradaya. So Vallabhacharya, 1478 to 1531 CE, is said to have been born in Andhra Pradesh. Also, all the acharyas are born in South India. In his view, Brahman, having Sat, Chit, and Ananda as its attributes, is the cause of the world. But it is nirvishesha, without distinction, in the sense of not having any ordinary or material attribute. It is one, infinite, and the inner controller of all the selves or souls. The difference perceived between them and Brahman is not natural, but due to his will, right? So there is some difference there like that. Between the two, there is also non-difference. So there's difference, but there's also non-difference, right? Which is perfect. There is non-difference, which is perfect, and not due to illusion or maya. So he doesn't subscribe to the idea of Shankara that the non-difference between the soul, the world, and God is due to illusion or adhyasa, a superimposition of maya, right? But he says it's not due to that. But hence his system is called Shuddha Advaita. Advaita means non-dualism or monism, and Shuddha means purified or pure monism, like that, without the hinge of maya. So the supreme being is Krishna, according to Vallabha. And the way of attainment, the Pushti, is the Pushti Marga. Pushti means nourishment. Marga means path. So the path of nourishment. Vallabha's teachings rely largely on the Bhagavata, the Bhagavad Purana, which is admitted as the fourth prasthana. So prasthana means a seminal text or a primary text, spiritual text. Usually we understand the prasthana's to be three. What are they? The Upanishads, the Vedanta Sutras or Brahma Sutras, and the Bhagavad Gita are considered to be the three prasthanas, and all the great acharyas of all the different sampradayas have written commentaries on these three, as well as the Vishnu Sahasranam. So Vishnu Sahasranam and Bhagavad Gita both come from Mahabharata. They are the main philosophical part of the Mahabharata. So these are called the three prasthanas. So Vallabha is saying here that he accepts a fourth prasthana. So as well as the Upanishads, the Bhagavad Gita, and the Brahma Sutras, he also accepts the Bhagavatam, the Bhagavad Purana, as a great pramana or proof or prasthana here, primary philosophical text. Accordingly, it is to be understood that its sevenfold meaning, right? The Bhagavata has this sevenfold meaning of Shastra, Skanda, Prakarna, Adhyaya, Vyakya, Pada, and Akshara. So whatever that means, we have to look it up in the Cultural Heritage of India, Volume 1, page 598. That'll probably be explained a little bit more. I'm not quite sure. We don't need to go into too much detail here. Pusti or nourishment means nourishment from the love of God derived from His grace, which nourishes its object. The grace may be ordinary, maryada, or special, pusti. So if anybody who understands a little bit about Gaudiya Vaishnavism, they can understand this maryada and pushti is the way that Ballabhacharya's people speak about Vaidhi Bhakti and Raganuga Bhakti, like that. So there's the ordinary type of grace, and there's the ordinary type of grace and sadhana, which leads to that, and there's the special type of sadhana and grace that leads to the Raganuga type bhakti, which is called pushti by the Ballabhacharyas. So the latter destroys the effects of time, karma, and swabhava. Okay. So the first step, according to Ballabha, to attain God's grace is to surrender to Him. This is similar to what is spoken of in the Pancharatra and also by Ramanuja. This invokes God's grace and purifies. The next step is to render service to the deity, to God in the form of a deity. Then comes Atmanivedanam, which consists of offering all one's belongings to God, never using anything before an offering is made of it, right? So everything that we have, we offer to God before we use it. Service creates a strong attachment to God called nirodha, which is of three kinds: prema, ashakti, and vyasana. Okay, so pushti or nourishment may be shuddha or pure, or mishra, mixed. Swarta for our own swarta means for our own benefit, or parata for the benefit of others, like that. Rituals enjoined by the scriptures are inferior to devotion, right? So devotion is more important in Ballabha's system than mere rituals. They belong to the path of Maryada. Mere rituals belong to the path of Maryada, in which God's grace becomes limited in some way or other. But in the Pushti Marga, like the Raganuga Marga, beyond the Maryada, beyond the ordinary Sadharana or Vaidhi system, right, involving rules and regulations, but the Pushti Marga is free, is a path of grace. The Pushti Marga is free from such limitations. It can also be called the path of Nirguna Bhakti. Nirguna in this sense probably also means, like in the Sri Vaishnava sense, without inauspicious qualities. Not without all qualities, but without any inauspicious qualities, right? So Nirguna Bhakti. As it transcends the material affections of sattva, rajas, and tamas, of goodness, passion, and ignorance. Such devotion has no object to gain and is disinterested. So it's disinterested devotion, not looking to make any gain for oneself, but being simply devoted to God for His pleasure and His purpose. So this path leads to the enjoyment of divine vision. The devotee has no need of renunciation. So in the Ballabha Sampradaya, there are no sannyasis. There are no sannyasis, there are no tyagis. Everybody's a grihasta pretty much, and that's the way it is. Like that. There's no need of material renunciation in the Ballabha Sampradaya. So his enjoyment, meaning God's enjoyment, shows everything, including moksha, as worthless, right? So we simply have to work for the pleasure of God. The cowherd the gopis of Vrindavan are treated as the acharyas of this path. So very much like the Raganuga Bhakti of the Gaudiya Vaishnavas. And Ballabha and Sri Chaitanya were contemporaries, so both of them had similar visions like that. So the devotee has to cultivate their mental attitude, the gopi bhava. The devotee has to try to think like the gopis, in the way that the gopis selfishly worshipped Lord Krishna and offered themselves to Lord Krishna and their service to Lord Krishna. The bridal mysticism of such devotees as the gopis, right, requires the cultivation of some feminine traits amongst the devotees. So this leads to the Bhagavad Bhava, in which the self finds the Lord in all things connected with him, and he is realized as Sarvatman, as the purveyor of all things, especially of all souls. In moksha, or liberation, the self, or the individual soul, acquires the Brahma body, Brahma Buddha Prasanatmata Sochadita Kanchati in Bhagavad Gita, right? One who has no desires or no hankering, right? The moksha, in moksha or liberation, the self acquires the Brahma body and satisfies all desires. There is no fall or return from that state, and this is common to all systems of Vedanta. The very last sutra in Vedanta Sutra is never, no return, no return. Means that nobody will return after reaching moksha or liberation to this material world. Vallabha declares that the Pusti Marga is the real purport of the Vedas, the epics, the Pancharatra, and all sacred texts. So we can look in here in his Tattvartha Deepika 140, where he says that. So it is open to all without any distinctions. It is the best amongst all paths to salvation because there is no fear of a fall from this path. Right. So the preceptors here are called in the Vallabha Sampradaya are called Goswamins. The gurus are called Goswamins, the acharyas, which is often written or spoken of as Gosai, right? So in Sanskrit, Goswamins becomes stylized in Hindi and Bengali as Gosai. Their dress is costly. One view is that this was originally the title of Chaitanya and the preceptors of his cult after Vallabhacharyas wrested control over the temple at Gokula, right, from the followers of Madhva, where they had the deity which ended up of Gopal, that ended up in Natadwara, Srinathji. They are said to have taken the title, right? So apparently this idea is that this title of Goswamis or Gosains came originally from the Vallabhas and then was transferred to the Gaudiya Sampradaya. That's the idea of A.K. Majumdar in Chaitanya, His Life and Doctrine, page 273. Okay, so Vallabha calls the Bhagavata, Gita, and Pancharatra as Bhagavat Shastras. Okay, so then they dress in costly and their dress is costly and food luxurious, the gurus in the Vallabha Sampradaya. Their followers, amongst whom are many rich merchants and businessmen, are required to dedicate body, mind, and wealth to them. Gold icons, gold deities of Gopala, Krishna, and Radha are worshipped in their temples. The Krishna image has a dark hue and is richly decorated. Worship is conducted 8 times every day. The ritual does not follow any traditional procedure, but consists of offering flowers, perfumes, and food to the accompaniment of prayers of praise. So, festivals are celebrated in their Vallabha temples. They include, in addition to Sri Krishna Jayanti, which is Krishna Janmastami, the Rasa Yatra, or the annual Rasa dance in October. The dances of the gopis are commemorated with song and dance. Pictures and images of Gopal are worshipped in the house. Vallabha's followers mark the forehead with two red vertical lines at the top of the nose with a round red spot between them. So in other words, just as the Gopi Chandans put on the forehead, they also have, but made with red lines, with red and with a red dot. Similar marks are also found on the arms and chest of the devotee. They wear rosaries of tulsi beads, or they have tulsi bead that they wear, and greet each other as Sri Krishna or Jai Gopal. So they have different greetings that they greet each other with, Sri Krishna or Jai Gopal. So Mathura, Vrindavan, Puri, and Dwarka are their holy places. The greatest sanctity is attached to Sri Natadwara temple near Agra. So Natadwara, Srinathji is in Natadwara, which is in Rajasthan near Agra. So everyone in the sect has to visit the place at least once in his life and contribute to its upkeep. So Vallabhacharya holds that the Brahma Sutras reject the validity of Pancharatra because it teaches the birth of the self. So he agrees in this way with Shankaracharya. He agrees with it, however, on all other points. Right? So according to him, it expounds the Pusti Marga. Right? So this describes the Pancharatra method of worship and comes under Maryada in Ballava's system. So the Pancharatra his idea is like Vaidhi Bhakti or Maryada in Ballava's system. The Vyuha system, however, is held to be inferior. The Vyuhas are held to be inferior to the god as Purushottama. Purushottama or Krishna is considered to be the highest form. Okay, so here's another form of Vaishnavism coming in the Ramananda Sampradaya. So what is the influence on the Ramananda Sampradaya? Ramananda was born in Prayag. The date is uncertain. Prayag is a confluence of the Ganges at Benares, right? He is claimed to be a direct disciple of Ramanuja. So in a dream, he was initiated by Ramanuja, but he's an acharya in North India. Or the fourth or the fifth descendant from him through Devananda, Haryananda, and Raghavananda, right? So there's some dispute about this. On account of a dispute with his preceptor Raghavananda, he was ostracized, right? This led to his founding his own new sect, open to all, without distinction of caste and creed. So he gave up these ideas of the Varnashram system of Varna, etc., and started his own sect which rejected caste and creed. So the regional language, meaning Hindi usually, replaced Sanskrit as the medium of instruction in the Ramananda Sampradaya. His 12 disciples were representative of all castes and professions, many professions. Bhakti and Prapati from the south were taken to the north by him. He recognized no distinction between God and his devotees. His teachings were marked by the spirit of synthesis, right? Whatever feeling or bhava is natural to one should be the basis for the means to attain God. Devotees could be householders or sannyasins or recluses or sadhus, right? The incarnation of God, Vishnu, as Rama, is held in the highest reverence amongst all of his forms, right? Therefore, the followers of this teacher are sometimes called Ramavats, followers of Rama, right? The Shalagrama, right? The Shalagrama and the Tulsi plant are also worshipped. Mendicants are called Bairagis, numerous in the Indo-Gangetic plain and largely hailing from the poorer classes, and they chant the names of Rama and Krishna. Ramanuja's liberation, based on the Vaishnava tradition coming down through the epics and the Puranas, must have influenced Ramananda in preaching that distinctions of caste should not be observed amongst devotees. However, no Devananda and Haryananda is known amongst the intermediate disciples of Ramanuja. Perhaps the tenets of this school went to the north through men that were impressed by the teachings of Ramanuja and have also thus influenced several small sects in North India through Ramananda, amongst whom the followers of Kabir, right, are often included, right? So, and we have an offshoot of the Ramananda Sampradaya, the Swaminarayan Sampradaya also. That's what they're talking about here. So now we have Sri Chaitanya. So Chaitanya Vaishnavism. Vishwambara, born in 1486 AD or CE, was called Gauranga on account of his fair complexion. After he became a monk or sannyasi, he was known by the name Chaitanya or Sri Chaitanya. His father was Jagannath Mishra and his teacher Vasudev Sarvabhauma, the great logician. During a pilgrimage, he received the Gopal mantra, was initiated into the Gopal mantra, a 10-syllable Gopal mantra, at Puri from Ishwara Puri. Now, he says at Puri, but in Chaitanya's biography, in Chaitanya Charitamrita, it says that he was initiated at Gaya. So after going there to do Shraddha for his father. So meditation on it led him to an ecstatic state filled with a vision of Krishna and made him a worshiper of the Lord in this form, along with Radha, so Radha Krishna. Though Chaitanya's teacher, being a disciple of Madhavendra Puri, belonged to the Madhva tradition, and that's doubtful because, as we've discussed before, Madhavendra Puri was not a Madhva. But this is just a hearsay. Anyway, Chaitanya himself taught not Dvaita, but Achintya Bheda Bheda, right? And in fact, we don't even see this Achintya Bheda Bheda show up in Chaitanya Vaishnavism until much later in the 18th century, mid of the 18th century, with Baladeva Vijayabhusha and Vishwanath Chakravarti. So he held that the difference and non-difference between the selves and God is inscrutable. This doctrine was later elaborated by Rupa Goswami, Sanatana Goswami, Jiva Goswami, each of whom had the title Goswami. Narayana and the four vyuhas are admitted in this system as shining forms of Krishna or God, free from the influence of the gunas of matter or the modes of nature, right? He has three powers or energies: Swarupa or sentience, Tatastha or the self, and Bahiranga or Maya. They correspond to Para, Kshetragya, and Avidya Shaktis, or powers of Para, the supreme, Kshetragya meaning the world, and Avidya or ignorance, right? The Swarup Shaktis has three attributes: Sat, Chit, and Ananda, also sometimes known as Sandini, Samvit, and Hladini, respectively. Radha represents the embodiment of the last one, Hladini Shakti. The ideal of Radha Krishna helps in realizing the absence of distinction between Krishna and his devotees. Loving devotion towards God, preman or bhakti rasa, is taken to be the fifth important aim of life, or purushartha, the others being dharma, artha, kama, and obviously moksha, and then prema. So they're considered there to be five purusharthas, prema or love for God being the last one, right? The other four being practice of virtue, dharma, acquisition of wealth, artha, satisfaction of desires, kama, and the attainment of salvation or moksha. Right, the sentiment of devotion and the various religious emotions under this head are dealt with in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu and Ujjvala Nilamani by Rupa Goswami and the Bhakti Sandarbha by Jiva Goswami. Bhakti or devotion is said to be of three kinds: sadhana, bhava, and prema. Each of these is a stage. So there's sadhana bhakti, bhava bhakti, and prema bhakti. The performance of enjoined rites rouses incipient devotion, which intensifies and which finally serves as a means and end of enjoyment. Bhakti should be preferred to karma, jnana, and vairagya, or works, knowledge, and detachment. It dispels doubts, destroys egoism, and makes the effects of past actions wither away. The practice of intense devotion requires that the injunctions of the Vedas, Shritis, Puranas, and Pancharatras texts should be observed, right? Shruti, Smriti, Purana, Di, Pancharatra, Vidim, Vedam, which is famously quoted by Rupa Goswami. Jnana and karma, or knowledge and action, right, should be regarded as a joint upaya, or means, in which the rituals are to be performed according to the Pancharatra. Jnana or knowledge can be practiced along with and as a subordinate to bhakti, right? So karma and jnana can be subordinates to bhakti to assist bhakti. Vishnu's name and mantras, particularly the Gopal mantra, are to be uttered always. All action must be dedicated to God. Pilgrimages are recommended. God's forms, qualities, and sports must be sung about. Property or surrender can also lead to moksha. So mostly he talks about bhakti yoga, but property is also understood or surrender to God. The idol or the deity of God should not be thought of as a piece of stone. When the idol or the deity is taken in procession, it must be circumambulated. Worship of images is called Devata Yaga, or the worship of the gods, right? The sacrifice of the gods, and that of household deities is called Archana. Hell awaits those who neglect them. Initiation is necessary for this kind of worship. Among men, the devotees of Vishnu are the best. Among the gods, Shiva and Brahma are to be worshipped as devotees of Vishnu, right? Distinctions should not be observed amongst devotees. One Gopal Bhatta, right, from the South India, from Sri Rangam, introduced the principles of Pancharatra into Gaudiya Vaishnavism. His teachings are found in the Hari Bhakti Vilas. the influence of the Pancharatra Agamas are considerable. Vyuhas are admitted. Sankarsana is said to preside over Ahankar. Vasudeva over Chitta. Ahankar means false ego. Chitta means intelligence, right, or knowledge. And Buddhi means intelligence. So Pradyumna over Buddhi and Aniruddha over Manas or mind, right? So the pupils of Chaitanya cite in their works the Sattvara Samhita, Hayashesha Pancharatra, and other such Pancharatric texts. Rituals involve Bhuta Shuddhi, right, or purification of the material elements in the body before the worship of God, and follow the Agama, the Pancharatra Agama directions. The school of Chaitanya has developed an elaborate and complex theory of divine descents. Krishna or Purushottama is the supreme being, and according to them is not a divine incarnation. He's the original, or avatari. He has three forms. The Swayam Rupam is natural and exclusive to him. The Tadatmika Rupa is a hypostatic manifestation identical with him and also distinct through appearance and possession of attributes. This is subdivided into Vilasa, as in the case of Narayana and Vasudeva, having the same power as the original exclusive form. Svamsa, which is inferior and exemplified by Matsya, Sankarsana, and others, and Avesha of Shakti, as in the Adishesha, Avesha of Shakti as in Adishesha, Jnana as in Sanaka and the other Kumaras, and of Bhakti in Narada. There are also fivefold divisions of divine descent. The Vyuhas represent the Purusha avatar. So Vyuhas are Vasudeva, Sankarsana, Pradyumna, Aniruddha, the Purusha avatars. The Guna variety allows the play of the three gunas, as in the case of the Trinity, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. These are guna avatars, or incarnations of the different modes of nature. 24 forms illuminate the Leela avatar type, right? This is coming from the 3rd chapter of the 1st canto of the Bhagavad Purana. Every Manu's reign involves a descent, as in the case of Hari, Vaikuntha, Vaman, and others. Among the 4 yugas, each has its own special kind of descent. So one for Krita Yuga or Satya Yuga, one for Treta Yuga, one for Dwapara Yuga, one for Kali Yuga.
Om Namo